What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazday. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now, listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazday, and I'm flying solo here. And so we're going to be talking about, this is one of my favorite quotes, and I've learned it the hard way, which is, success has many fathers and failure is an orphan. So I'm going to tell you a quick story, maybe not super quick, but quick enough, of when I first started my first business, Twin Capital. And I'd always wanted to start businesses, and I'd started a few businesses before that, one of which was not actually that successful. My first failure by the time I was 22 years old. And I was 25 when I started this next business, and I had done some little side hustles before that. And there was another quote that I was kind of like thriving off of at the time, which is a Winston Churchill quote, which is, success is moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. So I was really bought into that quote. Success is moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And so for me, I just assumed, hey, this is going to be hard. I have to go out there. I have to make it happen. Yeah, if it fails, no big deal. By the way, that's a pretty valid quote too. And I think like if you're an entrepreneur starting off, or if you're deep in entrepreneurism, you should accept both of these quotes, because they both kind of have a time and place when you need to understand them. And so I was thriving on this, like, success is moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And so I started building Twin Capital. And I talked about this on a previous episode, ended up building the company from myself. I started like by myself at the beginning of July 2003. And in a very short period of time, the business grew to tens of people and then over 100 people. So within 3 years, the business became the 40th fastest growing privately held company in America. It was number 40 in the Inc. 5000. That was a goal of mine. It was to make the top. I wanted to make the top 100 within the top 500 companies in the country. I made the top 50. We're number 40 in the country. We were the third fastest growing company in San Francisco at the time. And this is all by the age of like 28. And so what ended up happening was I built this all from the ground up. We'd bring in people that had no experience, a bunch of college people, a couple years out of college or straight out of college. And I was super proud of what we built. Like we had all these people. We were young. We were thriving. The company was making money. We were making money. Everyone was like kind of living the dream. And we were like in our early 20s, mid to late 20s. And so you can imagine at that age, what ended up happening was my team, my employees, my executive team, they were like we were all friends. Like this is my friend group, right? And we would, party on the weekends, and we would go on vacations, and we would go to dinners. And, imagine, just thinking back, if you're in your 20s, this is like your friend group. Like you can imagine it right now. If you're out of your 20s, and you're maybe not at that part of your life again, like imagine that your work group being your friend group. And in many ways, people have that, but they do it with coworkers. This is a little bit different in that I was the CEO and entrepreneur. My brother and I were the owners of the business. These were our team members. They were our employees, but they were also our friend group. And, it was pretty interesting what I'm about to say, what happened next. And what happened next was, the business was thriving. It went from really zero to it was a run rate of $10 million a year in revenue from 2003, middle of 03 till the beginning of 07, middle of 07. So within 4 years. And I remember distinctly, like, again, this is like long before, like entrepreneurism this is post.com boom. So being an entrepreneur was like not what it is today. I was the only person I knew who was an entrepreneur at the time. Like I didn't know anybody else who was an entrepreneur. And so I had friends talk about me in the third person. Oh, Darius is fearless. And, I talk about how successful I was. And at that point in my life, I was coming from a place of a really deep insecurity of wanting to prove myself. And I wanted to know that people were saying those things about me. It made me feel good, right? It made me feel unique, and it made me feel special. And probably, unfortunately, I felt like I deserved it, right? Now, did I deserve success? Yeah, I think if you work hard and you do the right things, and success comes your way, like, yeah, sure. Like, that is a byproduct of doing the right things in a business and working hard. Like, sometimes you get some big success out of it, and it's something to fight for, because I think it validates the work. Because as we all know, whether you're working hard in a business as an employee or as the entrepreneur, especially as the entrepreneur, you're taking a ton of risks to create that. And I had followed that mantra of Winston Churchill, which was success is moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. So I was always just like, and I've still done that, by the way. I just kind of like let the negative stuff roll off my shoulders. But having intertwined my personal life with my business life, what I was doing, I hadn't known, is I was setting myself up for a pretty big letdown. And so in August of '07, some of you hopefully were alive at the time, most of you, credit markets seized. So the credit markets collapsed. Now, everyone talks about '08, and everyone talks about the GFC in '08 and '09. It started in August of '07. And in my business, the credit market seized. So what did that mean for me? What it meant for me was essentially this. At the time, my business was doing about $1 million a year of revenue, a month of revenue in this business I had. What also had happened was the business had become more tough. It went from being a profitable business to essentially breaking even at that $1 million. We had grown too much. We had kind of grown faster from a team perspective, from an expense perspective, than we actually had our revenue. So I was investing in the business, and I started breaking even in the business. And I was like, shoot, like the business isn't. I mean, I invested a lot in the business. I was putting everything back into the business. And so I had this business that was doing about $1 million a month of revenue, and it was also doing $1 million a month of expense. So here's something interesting that you think about your own business. Businesses they all do. They accrue expenses in arrears. So what does that mean? That means that when I pay my bills in, let's say, August of '07, I'm paying for things that happen in July, with the exception of when I have to prepay stuff like rent. You pay as you use it, right? And you pay it in real time. But all the other stuff in your business, you're paying in arrears. I'll use an example of like payroll. Like, people work and then I pay them, right? So in the first week of August, I'm paying for the last 2 weeks of July, right? So you accrue expenses in arrears. So if something sudden happens to your revenue, your expenses don't right size at the same moment. They actually right size a month or two later, assuming you're able to right size. So if I have an event such as a credit market collapse in August of '07, you probably see where the story's going. If I have something like that happen, then I cut expenses immediately, which, by the way, I did. I will not see the changes happen until maybe October or November, because I'm going to be paying all my expenses in arrears. Even think about when you receive bills from people. People don't send you a bill the day after you usually get the bill at the end of the month of the previous month. So what ended up happening was credit markets collapsed. We had a ton of personal guarantees on these things called warehouse lines, or huge lines of credit to fund loans. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to fund those loans. And the reason I didn't fund them was that I called all the people that were buying my loans. Imagine if you have a business and you have these clients, or your buyers of your product, and they've been buying $1 million a month of your product. And let's say you had heard that all of them might not buy your product, but you have to go make everything. I have to go make all my products, manufacture all of them. In this case, it's loans. But when I go to sell them, a month after I start making them, because it usually took us about a month to make our loans, I would run into a situation where they might not buy them. Think about that. And so I quickly realized, oh, shoot, like, they might not buy my loans. So I had a decision. I pulled my entire team into the office and I said, hey, guys, we're not going to be funding any loans. We're going to go back to, at that point, brokering loans, which is me shifting that risk onto someone else. Someone else is going to sell the loan. I'm not going to make the money selling the loan. And this is getting a little bit technical, I know. But and when I did that, basically my revenue, for people that want to know what happened financially, the revenue dropped from 1 million immediately. By the way, this is like an immediate thing that happened. in August. So I made this decision the first Friday in August, 07, and the revenue dropped from $1 million to literally 150,000 that month. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to do the math. If your revenue drops from $1 million and your expenses are $1 million, and it drops from that to 150, you just lost $850,000. So that happens in August of 07. Well, like, again, expenses accrue in arrears, and it doesn't all happen in 1 month. So what ended up happening was between August, September, and October, our business lost about $2 million, which is about how much money we had in the bank then. We had about 2.3 million bucks, call it. So by the end of October, the business went from $2.3 million in the bank to $300,000, $250,000 in the bank. I literally could not cut expenses fast enough. I could not hold back paying people. I had to net 30 went to net 90. I'm calling up our vendors, asking them to help us, to work with us. And our team of over 120, 130 people at that point went to like 10, 15 people. It was like nothing you've ever seen. Now, the worst part of it was we had built this huge office. So I had this huge office. It was filled to the brim. I had 150, 130 people in there. I think at our peak, we had 150, 18,000 square foot, super modern office, which is cool. When you walk around an office like that, you're like, oh, you feel like, I remember I would like get out of my car, and I had this really nice sports car. I'd get out of the car, I'd walk down this like long tunnel of a hallway to get into my office. I'd go in, I'd hear the buzz in the sales floor. I remember I just felt so successful. I remember that was like one of like my favorite things about building that business. And to go from that and that was happening for years, to within 90 days, walking into, I called it the tomb, an almost empty office. It was there because we couldn't keep all these people. We had to cut expenses to survive. And so two things happened. Number one was the business stopped hemorrhaging money. I got it to a break even in November of 2007. So I got it to break even, and we ended up pivoting the business, which is a story for another time. And the other thing that happened was, we were in this big cavernous office. I went to our landlord. I tried to get them to put us into a smaller space. We had a 7-year lease in this space, 7 years. And I was at that point 18 months into the lease. So I had 5.5 years, and the next 5 years, by the way, it was probably 5 of the hardest years I've ever had in business. Actually, they are. The next 4 years actually were the 4.5 years were the hardest 4 years I've ever had, probably in my life. I thought like that was bad, the 3-month thing. The next 4.5 years were like way worse. I wish I had let the thing die. But what ended up happening was all these people who we had helped build their careers and helped make successful and really poured into them, a lot of them left. They were like, well, they couldn't get anything from us anymore. And there was a couple really big life lessons there. Number one was I'm a very loyal person. My brother's a very loyal person. And when you give loyalty, a lot of times you expect it in return. I think a lot of people might expect that. Think to yourself, hey, when I give loyalty, do I expect loyalty in return? And in my case back then, I did. And I learned something very specific then. I learned that, not then, I learned it was probably like, I don't know, a decade later. Yeah, 10 years later. It took me 10 years to figure this out. That loyalty is a gift. That when someone gives it to you, you shouldn't expect it, and it's a gift. And at that point in my life, I expected it. The other thing that happened was my friend group completely dissipated over the next, call it, year. So by the early spring, late spring, summer of 08, and mind you, I had pulled friend group, my personal friend group, not people not within the business, into my friend group in the business. So my friends outside of the business were friends with my friends in the business. And everyone had left, more or less. Not everyone, but almost everyone. And some people that I really considered my closest friends at that point in my life bailed. And look, me looking back, I'm 27. I'm in this like I was CEO of the business. I was the one that married the business. They were just dating the business. They left. They're like, we don't need. There's no like. I'm not giving them as much as they're giving me. It was off sides, and they were not hooked into the business the way I was. So a lot of my top people left. and they went and started their own businesses, which, they ended up being very successful at. But at that point, I was really, really upset by it. And the biggest thing that hurt then, the one thing that happened, which is kind of a bummer, and I'm going to say this just like, again, like I get it as an adult now looking at it, but at the time as a young adult, did not get it. My friends ended up having that summer of 2008. They had the summer of like fun. Well, I was stuck in entrepreneurial hell. And I think because I was their boss, they didn't want to invite me or my brother to do stuff. So all my friends, I lost my business and I was dealing with like being in hell in my business. All my friends ended up leaving and they were burnt out from the business too, but they took that summer off and they had like this summer of fun, going bonfires at the beach and parties and weekends and, going out at night. And this is like the beginning days of like Facebook, social media, and they're posting it. And my phone stopped ringing, and people started treating me differently. And it was really painful and it hurt a lot. And I was really resentful then. Now, as an adult looking back, I can say, just maybe speaking on their behalf, they're probably uncomfortable. They knew, there's probably some guilt and some shame maybe, or maybe not, I don't know. But I'm guessing that they were like, look, I just don't want to be like around those guys right now. They needed some space. It was a breakup, right? Some of these people had worked with us for years, and they just went and lived their lives, and like they didn't want to invite us, so we got excluded. And it was from an ego perspective, it was like one of the harshest things I ever dealt with, and it hurt my feelings more than anything else. It hurt my feelings. So, guys, if you're listening, if you're you know who you are, if you're listening to this, yeah, it hurt, I'm a human. It hurt my feelings, but I understand it. And there was a quote that I learned a few years later, because again, going back to before the implosion of the business, everyone like wanted to be my friend, and we were partying together and we were having fun, and we were, it was the time of my life. It was one of the best times I ever had in my life for those couple of years prior to the business implosion. And so I learned the quote that success has many fathers and failure is an orphan. And what's interesting about that is I'm going to fast forward to 5 years ago, because at that point I thought I had earned my stripes. I deserved the respect. I was on my way up. And I realized that the success I had in the business was its own thing. It was separate from me as a person. Now, there was many life lessons there. I quit being super close friends with my coworkers. Like I still have some friends as coworkers, but there was a bit of like, I put people at arm's length distance, right? That was one of I was very careful about it after that. And I really was careful to make sure I maintained a friend group outside of the business that had nothing to do with the business. And I was careful to invite those friends into the business stuff. So I really divided the business up a little bit, because I had once bitten, twice shy. Number one. Number two, what I did was again, 10 years later, I learned that loyalty is a gift. I didn't expect it anymore. And number three, what I learned was that my title is separate from me as a person. And so 5 years ago, actually 5 years ago last week, I ended up, deciding that I didn't want to be CEO of TMS anymore. And not the exact same thing, but a similar thing happened. There was nothing, people that were like that reported to me, or my executive team, or people that were always checking in on me because I was the boss, or my vendors that gave a shit about me. All these folks kind of like fizzled away, or they were less interested in what I was doing. And this time though, I had I had a, very separate life at that point from my business. So that was something I'd learned. And B, I went back and I really, marinated on that quote of success has many fathers and failure is an orphan. And even though I wasn't a failure necessarily, I knew that I wasn't able to pour into people. And so from my business, I wasn't able to leverage my business to help people in their personal lives or business lives. And so I didn't have that to offer. And so when those things fizzled away the second time, it was a non-event for me. And so whenever I hear about folks, or I'll see this happen sometimes, I think our egos are very strong. They don't want to be told that we're not good. They don't want to be told that we're bad, or that we're not loved, right? And this probably came back to like me just wanting to be loved by people and feeling like I wasn't at that moment. So I want you to think about, like, whenever you've had a success, again, success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan. Has nothing to do with you. So for me, one of the life lessons I learned to detach myself from the experience of being let down when my success isn't here. Because guess what? There will be moments in your life when you have success, and there will be everyone will be there, high-fiving you. You could think of people like a Kanye West, like, oh my God, when he was the most famous guy in the world, and then he did some stupid stuff and he failed. And that dude's been an orphan for a while. People don't want to be around him, right? So we are tribal creatures, like you do not want to be with the person who's been like basically blackballed in the tribe, because you're going to get blackballed next, right? So this is wired into us that, hey, we need to protect ourselves. Failure is an orphan. That's okay. Those moments are the times to regroup, take a look back at what went right, what went wrong, and then don't give yourself some grace and know that, hey, now's a moment for me to become better, to take this as a learning lesson. Because I will tell you the one thing that's happened for me every time I've had these failures, and going back to that Winston Churchill quote, success is moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. As an orphan, when I'm failing, I need to move forward without loss of enthusiasm. But I also need to, with new lessons, so I can approach life better. I can approach the business better. I can approach the relationship better. And when that happens, what I've found, it's not always easy. When I had that 4 or 5 year period, that is a freaking movie. I could tell you what happened then. It was terrible, but I got past it. I got through it. I got better, and I had my next big success. And my next big success was 20 times the success of my first success, right? So we have these opportunities to go exponential. Going exponential is when we learn from our mistakes. We don't make them again. We improve, and then we leverage the better us to create that next success, and not getting married to the fact that we are not our success. We are separate from our success. Our success is simply an outcome of us doing the right things. It has nothing to do with us, except for the fact that we are the person that showed up to make it happen. And there will be a failure that comes next to it. And we're not that either. You're not your success. You're not your failure. Who cares about the many fathers, and who cares about the orphan? That has nothing to do with you. That is separate from you. Your job is to show up, be your best, leverage your talents to create greatness in the world. So I hope this was helpful for all of you that are maybe going through life and going through some successes or some failures. Just know that you are not your success. You're not your failure. Those many fathers and those orphans are not you either. Until next time.
You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on, so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.